Today I'm going to show you what I think is probably the most impressive piece of tech I've seen yet for solo creators, work from home, and online educators. You're going to get a little peek behind the scenes at the new studio space before it's fully completed and before the big reveal. This video is sponsored by Insta360. That means they're actually paying me money to make this video. Now, I get asked to do sponsored features like this on the channel all the time. In 7+ years of doing YouTube, this is only the second one that I've said yes to because this thing is just that genuinely impressive. First things first, whenever you see my face talking to you today, it's on a webcam. This is the Insta360 Link. It's an AI-powered 4K webcam. It's got a 1/2-inch sensor and it's on a 3-axis gimbal. That allows it to do stuff most webcams out there can't do. This cam does things so impressive, it would be easy to overlook basic stuff like autofocus, which is where a lot of other webcam offerings have fallen flat for me in the past, even really expensive offerings. Not this. Watch. I'm gonna hold this up to the camera so you can see the crazy amount of detail we can get on this thing. And then when I pull it away, boom, I'm right back in focus. This is awesome. The minimum focusing distance on this thing is 4 inches. So if you're somebody who talks a lot about products, you're a peripheral reviewer, or like a beauty creator that does a lot of cosmetic stuff, anything where you're holding products up to the camera for the viewer to see, this is absolutely awesome. This alone puts it very far ahead of most other webcams out there. But the first major feature we have here is tracking. You can move and this camera is gonna move with you to keep you perfectly framed up. Obviously, this would be really cool for streamers, creates a really dynamic face cam, especially if you're somebody that moves around a lot when you play. But I immediately thought of like online lecturers, people that do dance tutorials, fitness influencers. I was really skeptical when I first heard about this because thanks to this giant beard, I don't exactly have an AI-friendly face shape. Just ask any Snapchat filter or Lensa profile pic. Awful. The tracking is really impressive here. You get 3 different speeds. You have fast, normal, or slow. You can do this really natural or do it really exaggerated. If you set it to slow, it kind of mimics the idea of a handheld camera operator following you around and keeping you in frame. If you set this up to fast, this gets really erratic. Like it'll follow you pretty much anywhere. It just kind of depends on what kind of visual style you're going for. And you don't have to drop this down to 1080p to get tracking either. This works in full 4K. There are a couple modes that work in conjunction with the tracking, namely AI zoom, which I really like because you can frame this up on your face, and then if you scoot way back in the frame, it's gonna zoom to follow you. And when you scoot back up closer to the camera, it'll zoom out to maintain that framing. You can set this for half body, which I really like for most things. You can set it to full body if you're gonna be walking around and pacing in the room. Most of the time you would keep it either on head or half body. The tracking here is very sticky. This thing is bulletproof 99% of the time. If it ever gets off for any reason, all you do is just reach up and double tap the front of the camera and it resets itself to its default angle and deactivates tracking. I do notice that the tracking has a tendency to center your face in the frame, which is fine for web calls, but if you're doing like any kind of production stuff, I would like to see an option in future firmwares where you can set the tracking to park your face in the top third. It just gives a more presentable half body when you're doing talking head stuff. You do get full manual control over the gimbal though, and you can do that either with this little digital joystick that they have here in the software, or you can just grab in the frame and move it around until the framing looks right to you. You can zoom in with the software itself, zoom in and out, or you can just use the scroll wheel to do this as well and reframe. And once you have everything set up the way you like it, you can just set a preset here. The cool thing with this is that you can set up multiple presets depending on how complex your stuff is. So if you have a different thing that you want to point at on your stream, or you have a guest on your stream, or you have like a cat tree in the background that your cats like to play on, you want to flip back and forth, you can just set these presets up, and then this thing moves crazy fast in between these like a whip pan, and it's not doing this digitally. As you can see, the camera is actually moving with you, so you're not losing any quality to do this. Like if you want to come in here and do like the zoom in extreme close up, you can do that, and all you got to do is just set a preset, and then you can just zoom right out like this, and then pow, for your extreme close-up. It's really easy to set this stuff up. Matter of fact, a lot of the features in this software can be set to hotkeys, so you can even toggle between 3 different devices here for multi-cam setups if you have a really complex production. The software here is really handy. Everything you're seeing today was recorded directly in this software. It just outputs to an AVI file, and you never have to worry about this competing with any other video conferencing software, OBS, Discord, whatever. All you do is just deactivate the preview window here, and then without exiting your video conferencing software, where you have complete control over the whole feature set of this camera. You can even reduce the entire software down to just a floating toolbar. And there's a lot of adjustments inside the software too. So far, you've been watching this all with auto exposure and auto white balance on, because I want to give you an idea what this camera could do if you just plugged it in and let it go. This is all daylight coming from this big window right here. You got the bright white shirt, the dark background, more daylight in the room from behind me. So the camera is doing a really good job. If you don't want to do auto exposure, you can come in here and manually set your shutter speed, manually set your ISO, and set your exposure curve. I find auto exposure does a really good job in handling most scenarios. Auto white balance, same thing. It's set to auto right now, but if you deactivate it, it's set to 5750, 5600 is usually where I would keep it. I don't have an issue with the auto white balance here at all either. Brightness, contrast, saturation I did bump just a little bit because it gives me a little more color in my face, and sharpness. And you can set all this stuff to a preset when you're done. I thought this would be a pretty interesting comparison. So I've eliminated all the daylight in the studio space. We just have a big key light right here. And then I have an overhead light as well, and some of the blue colored lights behind me. I've also gone with a darker shirt, and I've turned off auto settings here. Autofocus is still on, but the exposure I've dialed in, the white balance I've dialed in. And what we're looking at is this camera, the Insta360 at $300 versus the camera setup that I use most of the time for my web calls. That's a Sony a7 IV body, a Sigma 24mm lens, and an AverMedia Live Gamer 4K capture card. That's a $3,500 setup. Now, granted, I use my professional setup for more than just web calls, and you can get a lot cheaper mirrorless or DSLR setups if you want to go that route. You don't get tracking or anything like that, but it gets mildly annoying for me to have to break down my main camera setup just to hop on a web call. So to have something at this quality that's plug and play, that also has tracking and everything else included, that's a W for me. Naturally, I was pretty impressed to see an image this quality come out of such a tiny unit. This is a lot smaller than I expected it to be, which I hear a lot, and it's a lot heavier than I thought it would be for its size, which I never hear. Included in the box, you get your manual, a USB-C to USB-C cable, and a USB-A to USB-C adapter. The camera has a little blocky rectangular base, which has a non-slip bottom if you want to sit it somewhere flat. It's got a standard 1/4-inch tripod mount and your standard folding clip setup like you see on every webcam. It's got an LED ring around the top of the base that lights up green when it's active, and it flashes blue when it's taking commands. This helps you really get the hang of gesture control. You can do a few things with gesture control. You can just hold your palm flat up to the camera, it'll flash blue, and now my tracking is active and it's gonna follow me around again. If I wanna turn it off for any reason, I just hold my palm back up, it'll flash blue again, and now it's deactivated. If you wanna zoom, you just make a little L with your fingers, you push up, it's gonna zoom in, or you can make an L and pull down a little bit, and that's gonna zoom out. You can also throw up a peace sign to enter whiteboard mode. I don't have a whiteboard, and it gets a little confused if it's looking for something it can't find, so I'm not gonna do that. If you are presenting on a whiteboard, you can just use these 4 included recognition markers. You just put these in the corners of the whiteboard, and when you enter that mode, it's gonna zoom in on that board, attempt to square it up in the frame, and lock focus. So you can write on this, you can walk past it. It's not gonna release focus on the board until you let go of whiteboard mode. This is a killer feature for online educators and business use. Inside the software, you can go in here and turn off all the gestures that you don't think you're gonna be using, or if you find something that interferes, or you can simply turn them all off. But even as somebody that talks with my hands a lot, I didn't have any trouble with the camera recognizing gestures when I didn't mean to. So your 4K video modes here are 24, 25, and 30 FPS. If you go down to 1080p or 720, you also get 50 and 60 FPS. And you can use HDR mode. What you're seeing right now is the integrated webcam on my laptop in a very challenging but very common work from home situation where you have a lot of backlight behind you from natural light, and it's really wrecking the overall image. Now you're seeing the exact same framing, same setup, same conditions, just moving over to the Insta360. You can already see what a huge improvement this camera is over the integrated camera. Turning HDR on, it reduces the brightness of the window behind me, and it brings up the darker areas of the frame in an effort to give you a more consistent looking image. The Link also supports true uncropped 9:16 vertical shooting. Just go into your settings, go into streamer mode, and it's going to unlock some vertical resolutions that you can use in the video software of your choice, OBS in this case. In one of these, I've left the camera in its original horizontal mount, and the gimbal has rotated to do vertical. And in the other one, the way they recommend, I've actually rotated the camera a full 90 degrees. That way allows full use of the gimbal, which really comes in handy if you're doing complete full body stuff because you still get the up and down. This is awesome if you want to create some true vertical content for mobile that doesn't look like horizontal content that's been zoomed and cropped. you can easily tell which one of these frames is the true vertical. You've got the keyboard here, you can see the box art here. The framing is way better, and the data is way better too, because we're getting a full 1088 by 1920 screen here, not a full HD screen that's been zoomed and cropped down. This is also awesome if you stream directly to TikTok, or if you multi-stream, like your primary stream is on YouTube and you want to run this camera to do a full vertical multi-stream to TikTok. As if that wasn't enough in terms of functionality, they also have a desk view mode where you can get the camera to point at a 45-degree angle right down at your desktop, and now it's using software to try to constrain the proportions here. You can't see like on the box edges, especially like on the round cylinder here, but this is awesome if you're like an artist and you just want to shoot the camera down to show what you're doing. They also have a mode that does true overhead shots. You just need a tripod or some kind of mount that's going to be able to give you a bird's eye view. And that's on a hotkey and can be assigned to a Stream Deck button as well, so a single camera production starts to feel like a multi-camera production. I also really like that when you're not using the camera, it just kind of points its little robot eyes straight down and goes to bed for privacy. Adorable. It's worth mentioning too that there are dual noise canceling mics on the front of this thing. Now, you've been hearing the studio mic pretty much this entire time, but now you're actually just hearing the webcam. I'm sitting probably about a foot further away from this than I would on a normal video call. It still holds up really well. Obviously, the further you get away, the more of a challenge it's going to have, but I think this is going to work great for any kind of Zoom meeting, any kind of web call work at all, even in kind of a noisy room. So yeah, this is a sponsored video today, but I have genuinely never been this impressed with a webcam ever. I don't have to say too much subjective when a product's performance speaks for itself like this does. Yeah, of course it's gonna make for a dynamic face cam, but it has so much potential for use in business, online educators, basically any solo content creator. If you wanna get your hands on one of these for yourself, just click the link in the description to visit Insta360 and learn more. Big thanks again to Insta360 for sponsoring. That's it for today, and I will catch you all in the next one. Stay up.